In the last video, we completed our item info view, and that was the first piece of the puzzle to creating this view controller. In this video, we're going to create the second piece of the puzzle and probably the biggest piece. And what we're going to create here is our parent or superclass view controller. Now, what is that? Let's talk about how we're going to build these. So as you can see on the screen, these two like cards, if you will, right? The one with the purple button and the green button, like they're the same structurally, right? Of course, we show different information, but the overall structure of those child view controllers is the same. So what we're going to create here is a superclass called the ItemInfoVC view controller. And that's going to hold all the common logic, basically the layout of the UI. And then we're going to create subclasses of that superclass view controller that are more specific to the GitHub stuff, right? That's going to show the public repos. It's going to create the purple button, and that purple button has a different action than the followers button. So we're going to customize that. So basically when you're dealing with like superclasses and subclasses, like the superclass has all the shared code that's going to be the same between the two, whereas the subclasses are going to be all the specific stuff. So in this video, we're going to create that superclass, and then in the next video, we're going to create the individual subclasses of that view controller. So let's get to it. So over in your view controllers folder here, let's open that up. Make this bigger so we can kind of see what's going on there. Do a Command N, and we're going to create a CocoaTouch class. This is going to be a UI view controller. Nope. I don't want to create it called view controller. We want to create this GF item info VC. Hit next, create. And then as usual, we're going to get rid of all these comments, all that stuff, clean up the workspace, and then we're going to start creating this. So as usual, I like to start with the elements of the UI. Pulling up the design again, you can see here. Remember we talked about we're going to have a stack view for our item info views, right? So we're going to need that stack view. We're going to need our two item info views, and then we're going to need our button. So 4 elements on this view controller that we're going to lay out. Let's create those. So let stack view equal UI stack view, just initialize that. We're going to configure that in another function. And then let item info view 1. It's going to equal a GF item info view, right? The one that we just created last video. And then let item info view 2, because again, we have 2 of them, GF item info view as well. And then our action button, let action button equal GF button. And we're not going to initialize this with our typical background color and title. And the reason being is because this is our superclass. This is kind of like our generic class that holds all the common stuff. Like, right, like we don't know if it's a purple one or a green one yet. This is just the generic one. So we're just going to initialize a general GF button with our basic configuration. We're not going to give it a background color yet. We're going to do that in the subclasses that are more specific to each type. We'll get to that in the next video. Like I said, most of what's going on in this super class, this GF item info VC, is going to be the layout and just the generic stuff. So let's start laying things out. And the first thing we want to do is basically create our background. Pulling up the design, you see how we have this card looking background. We got the corner radius around it, and it's like a secondary background color. Well, that's what we're going to configure here in this function. So func configure background view. And that's view.layer.corner radius, and that is going to equal 18. Again, 18 is just a number I dialed in. You can tweak this number if you want, more rounded corners, less rounded corners. 18 was what I found to look good. And then we want view.background color equals .secondary system background. So again, if you pull up your semantic UI app, you can see all the different colors. Well, secondary system background will give us this, on light mode, just a very, very light gray. And then on dark mode, as you see here in this design, just a lighter version of the dark mode. So let's call this function here before we forget, configure background view. And then the next function we want to do is we want to lay out our UI. So func layout UI. And again, these can be private, right? Because we don't want to call these outside of this class, private. And so when we're laying out our UI, the first thing we want to do is add the subview. So view.add subview. We want to add our stack view. So we're going to add the stack view there, and then our item info views up here. those are going to be added into the stack view. So we don't have to constrain those. Those constraints are going to happen within the stack view. So we don't need to add those to the sub view. We need to add the button though. So view.add sub view, and we want to add our action button. So these are the two main items in our UI that we need to lay out. And before we forget to do this on our stack view dot translates auto resizing mask into constraints equals false. And then I know we're going to need this, so let padding of a CG float equal 20, right? Same old stuff we've been doing, because now we're going to lay out some constraints here. NS layout constraint dot activate. Get our array of constraints, and the only two we're going to lay out again are the stack view and the action button. And pulling up the design again, you can see when we're only laying out those two items, it's a relatively simple layout because the stack view is just that rectangle at the top, and then the button is, you know, the button. So it's a relatively simple layout when you have using the stack view, because again, the item info views go inside the stack view, and the stack view handles the layout. We'll get to that in a second. So we want to do stack view dot top anchor dot constraint. It's going to be equal to the view dot top anchor, and then the constant is going to be padding. We're going to do 20 padding all around. So stack view dot leading anchor dot constraint equal to view dot leading anchor, constant is padding. And again, more repetitive constraints. And like I said, just to, while we're doing this, hopefully you're getting a lot of good practice on these constraints, but there are some libraries you can use if you choose to, like SnapKit, tiny constraints that really make this concise. If you find this to be too repetitive, there's extensions you can write to do this. We're still doing this again for educational purposes, doing it the long way, because I really want to drill in the fundamentals so you really fully understand how to do it the long way before you start, you know, shortening it and making it better. So stack view dot, now we need the height anchor dot constraint, and we're going to make that equal to 50. And again, that's the number I dialed in based on what I know the height of our item info view is going to be. You know, with our SF symbol label and our count label, I know 50 is a good number there. So that handles the stack view. Now we need to handle the button, and we're going to pin this to the bottom of the view controller. So action button dot bottom anchor dot constraint. It's going to be equal to view.bottom anchor. Remember, when you're dealing with the bottom and the trailing, you got to do negative padding. So again, we're doing 20 padding all around. And same thing with the leading and trailing. Stack view.leading anchor.constraint. It's going to be equal to view.leading anchor padding. No, see, this is kind of the bad thing about doing all these constraints is it's very repetitive and sometimes your mind wanders. So you see, I just typed in stack view there, but we're doing the action button dot trailing anchor dot constraint equal to view dot trailing anchor negative padding, because we're dealing with the trailing. And then now the height is going to be 44. So action button dot height anchor dot constant equal to 44. So this is our UI for now. Let's make sure we call this layout UI. Now the third function we need to do is to configure our stack view. So remember I said I like to do the layout UI stuff at the bottom, because usually, you know, you're dealing with logic. I like to push that to the bottom. So private func configure stack view. Stack view dot axis, because we want this to be a horizontal stack view, right? We don't want it to be vertical. We want it left and right horizontal. So you have to let it know if we're going top to bottom or left to right. And we need to do stack view dot distribution. So this is how things are distributed within the stack view. You'll see here, let's line up some equal signs. You'll see I'll do a dot. You'll get some options here. Whoops. Dot equal centering, equal spacing, fill equally, fill proportionally. So this is how your items in your stack view will fill. So equal centering will take the center of each item and equally space it from the center. Equal spacing will just put an equal amount of spacing in between it so it's evenly distributed. We're going to do equal spacing. You can do fill, where like it'll make sure it fills up the whole stack view, but they might not fill equally. Fill equally will do that, and you'll see you can experiment with you know, trying these different ones. We're going to do equal spacing, but if you want to experiment, see what they do, you can see how it affects your alignment, and that's really all we need to set up. There's you can do stack view dot spacing to set like a minimum spacing amount in between each one. you know, if you want to make sure there's a big gap in between it, you can customize that. We don't need to do that for our specific layout, but I just wanted to let you know there's a little bit more configuration you can do on your stack view should you need to tweak it a little bit more. And I'll leave a link to the stack view documentation in the notes, so you can kind of explore that if you like. But now we need to add our views here. So stackView.add arranged subview. So you can't just add subview. That's not going to work. Add arranged subview is what we need for the stack view, because that's what will lay everything out. And we want to add ItemInfoView1. And then stackView.add arrange subview ItemInfoView2. And there we go. So let's make sure we call this, bad habit I have, configure stack view. So like I said, our superclass of a GF ItemInfoVC is very generic because, like I said, it holds the shared code amongst all the different types of view controllers. So what we did was we basically set that background of the card, the curved kind of background of the view controller. We configured our stack view to be horizontal, equal spacing. We've added our item info views to the stack view. That's going to lay out nicely. And then we laid out our UI, which when you do it like this is relatively simple, right? You just have that rectangular stack view up on the design and then your button. And our UI is set. And this is almost all the generic stuff. We have to do a little bit more with the buttons. We're going to do that in a little bit in the next video. But for the most part, our superclass is done. And the reason we did it on the superclass is because, like I said, pulling up the design again, these two view controllers are laid out the same. You don't want to repeat that code. So you put all that shared code in the superclass and then just do the custom code or the individual code, you know, that makes each one unique in the subclass. So hopefully that all made sense. Let's go on to the next video where we're going to create those subclasses, and then we'll be able to start to see the fruits of our labor. We'll be able to plug those into our child view controllers and, our container views on the user info screen, and we'll be able to see this all in action.